Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Tuesday Tips. I'm Michael Barber, and you're joining us on the Grow Schools channel. We're really excited to be here today for another conversation on challenges and issues that school leaders are facing. We're here every Tuesday for about 10 to 15 minutes talking all things challenges for school leaders. Today, I am super excited because we've got two amazing guests, a new face to bring in here. Dr. Marliana Palmieri is here to join us today. We've also got Ryan Eldridge as well, one of my colleagues. Ryan and I are super excited that Dr. Palmieri is here to have a chat with us today. She has been around the charter school space for many more years than you and I have, Ryan. I'm not going to quantify because I don't think that's fair, but a significant amount of years, multiple decades working with school leaders and being a school leader. So we're really excited to have her here today. We're going to tackle a big and relevant topic right now. It is, of course, mid-April, and school leaders are facing budgeting challenges. They are facing, making sure so that they can submit reports to their respective states. And there's some key questions that always come up to the top of our inboxes and our radar when you're talking. And so we want to try and tackle some of those questions related to budgets today. So we asked Dr. Palmieri to join us for this conversation because she's got some immense perspective, having advised school leaders on some of these questions. I will start with this first question. One of the things that's a big topic of conversation, as we think about April and heading into next school year is, of course, the topic of funding. Particularly as we think about ESSERS, of course, and the fact that, by September, we will likely have drained those ESSER funds and there will be no more requests available for ESSERS. And so next year's budgets are probably going to look very different for schools as they compare to the last few years of, coming out of the COVID pandemic and into this endemic period that school leaders face. And so first question I'll tee up to Ryan, and then we'll come back to Dr. Palmieri for her perspective. But Ryan, I know you're hearing a lot about the impact of the end of ESSERS to budgets, but what if school leaders need to think about, when it comes to this, end of ESSERS period as they head into next school year?
Yeah, good question. As I speak to a lot of school leaders, well, first off, have they spent it all? Because they still have till about September 30th, to obligate those funds. And then liquidating them by January. There are some cases where extensions are granted, on a case-by-case basis for about 14 months to March of 26. However, first off, making sure that they've actually allocated those funds. But now that the end of that one-time money is there, a lot of schools are running into situations where they've either hired new staff, new positions, and or implemented new programmatic enhancements to the organization. And now the question is, well, how do I pay for that? And so I know a lot of schools are wrestling with these positions that we can maintain because they've been successful, or do we need to eliminate them? As well as how do we pay for it all? And sometimes that causes them to have to get creative if they want to maintain those programs they implemented during ESSER funds. So I'll turn it over to Marlena to see if she has any other insight as well.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Not only the loss of the ESSER funds, which in schools that I typically work with are very urban charter schools. And it's a loss of almost like $6,000 per child. So if you have an 850 kid school, that's a $1 million hit to your budget. And we not only are facing the loss of ESSER funds, but traditionally across the country right now, we're facing an enrollment loss. We have the deaths are now outpacing births. So our kindergarten classes, where we used to have waiting lists upon waiting list, are just not there anymore. So the reality is that especially if you have funded positions, which many schools did to impact the learning loss, social emotional learning, all of that, if you funded those positions, you have to figure out how do we keep this going and take away this critical resource of guidance counselors, social workers. And so while some schools invested in facility infrastructure, that's, I think, where the biggest challenge is going to be. How do we replace all of the scaffolding that we've put around our kids for the last couple of years since we returned from the pandemic.
That's such a good word to utilize in this conversation as scaffolding that we've put around kids. I think that's such an incredibly descriptive word to think about around budgets and just conversations. And Dr. Palmieri, you touched on two challenges, right? Not only ESSERS ending, but population dynamic shifting. The third challenge that I think we're going to see with states is obviously there's this impending corporate tax challenge that states are going to have with the lack of corporations paying taxes in cities where they have typically had a workforce that's working in real life together. That's going to hit state budgets, and we may be facing other challenges from a budgeting perspective, from whether it's deferrals or decreased revenue for states that may cause individual challenges with other states. It feels like it's a trifecta of big budget challenges that are going to be facing schools as they look into the 2024-25 and 26-27 school years.
We're also seeing our donors shrinking. Whether they're corporate partners or whether they're individual citizens, because they're concerned that their money might go for naught, particularly in charter schools where we are facing closings in some instances. So they don't want to put their money on it. I hate to say it, on a dead horse. So, so even our donor base is shrinking.
So, it's a significant amounts of challenges from a budgeting perspective as school leaders look till next year. Both of you and Dr. Paul in particular, you've been around this space for a long time. Beyond just the total amount of revenue per student that schools are facing, there has to be ways that schools can creatively get around these challenges of a decreasing revenue base. What are some that you've seen in the past? Or what are some of the things that you're advising school leaders to think about as they head into this budgeting season for next year?
Well, there are still availability of some funds coming in through your local community boards, or there might be pet projects. We're lucky enough to be in the shadow of Yankee Stadium, and we've often used the Yankee Fund. They came and helped paint the outside of our building. It funded a mural. So we've been going out to our community-based organizations and other nonprofits that still may be getting some money, that they might throw $10,000 at a project, $20,000 at a project. So we're literally hitting the pavement. The reality is that all of us in the charter world know that we've always done, less is more for us. And so when we went through the Great Recession, we had to figure out ways to be creative with our budget. But what I would advise to anyone who's a charter leader, or if you are in a charter consortium, whatever you do right now, we're going to have to make some pretty gut-wrenching cuts. That's our reality. It always has been, but never to this extent after we've had the luxury of all of this infusion, 190 billion plus of money into our schools. And so whatever you have to do, you need to take time with your school. And whether you have a leadership committee or you have, your parent advisory group, everybody needs to come to a representative table, and you've got to articulate your priorities, number one. So everything that I always advise our schools to do is it has to be evidence-based, because what happens is that we have people go into their nice little silos of their pet programs. But if they're not giving us the bang for the buck, it's time to really think, do we need to divert those funds to things like learning loss, social emotional learning, and all of those things? So you've got to get your constituents around the table so that people feel that they have a voice. And we're going to have to make cuts. So how do you decide which programs are absolutely critical, which positions are absolutely critical, and how can you either creatively fund them through, outside sources, or what do you not spend the money on? So for instance, for us, custodial supplies and all of those things, everything's been going up. We cut back on that. We did it. Basically every finance meeting is a zero-based budgeting meeting where we're looking at year to date to our budget. Where do we have some room that we can move things around? So, and that takes conversations with people so that no one's surprised by it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say I was noticing this quite a bit too, as I think just analyzing overall costs across the board, including books and supplies, and particular vendors you've used historically. Maybe there's some cost savings you can find in different areas, including, insurance costs, benefits packages, analyzing, comparing quotes, getting different bids. Sometimes it's time to kind of take a look at some of those areas as well. I noticed a lot of schools are starting to more aggressively write more grants now, as well, as there's, still grant programs out there for specific needs. And, maybe in the past they haven't had to do as much, but now they're really starting to focus on that, including, again, going back to the fundraising, the aspects there, and also talking to a lot of schools is the investment back into marketing. The idea that, it's a very competitive landscape out there for school choice. With declining enrollments right now is not the time, to kind of just assume that the local fair or knocking on doors is going to, fill the seats, but actually having to invest a little bit more heavily in that area as well. So.
Yeah, some incredible thoughts there. I want to top line some of these so we get some head nods from the both of you. Get creative on thinking about revenue sources, right? It may be the team, it may be a sports team, it may be a corporation that's near your school, right? But think about alternative budget sources or revenue sources, I should say. Articulate your priorities, right? The team's got to be on the same page as to what's being saved or what's being cut so that we are all swimming in the same direction. How you make those decisions. I think Dr. Palmieri, you said evidence-based decision making. You've got data to back up what decision you're making. Ensure you've got all those constituents. Those are your school leaders, your school teachers, your advocates, your board. Make sure they've got a voice at the table and you can steer messaging appropriately, because I would imagine as schools make cuts, there's going to be pushback from parents. There's going to be pushback from the community. That school needs to be able to be putting a message forth that's one that's cohesive, that everybody's sharing as to why these cuts are being made and why we have to make them. Ryan, something you mentioned, grants and other fundraising opportunities, and then continuing to invest in enrollment as families and kids are making decisions on where they're going to get their education. We've got to be able to be there and present so that when someone's doing a search online or looking across social media for alternative education opportunities, that those schools are there. I think my big takeaway as I listen to both of you provide this expertise is there is a lot of time that's going to have to go into this work, right? And school leaders are already tapped for so much of their time on spending managing their schools and ensuring their mission is being met. What do school leaders have to do to craft this time? This has got to be a case of giving up, certain luxuries they may have in their personal, professional life, or making decisions as they head into budgeting season. They're gonna feel pain. Any thoughts there on how they get aligned on making sure that that these priorities happen?
Well, I think that the alternative to that is not doing anything about it and not having a school anymore. And so while we all have to, tighten our belt, we also have to look at the time. And so, people like myself, because I'm basically a consultant to my schools now, and looking to outside sources is how can we even, how do we go out and get enrollment and still go through a zero-based budgeting exercise? It's why we've reached out, obviously, to Grow Schools, because we realized that we had a partner who could help us with our enrollment. And we've never had to do that in so many years. We always had huge waiting lists. So the time, we understand, is going to be, and some of our people are giving up some of their spring break coming up so that we can have these. And we do have once a week or sometimes twice a week, we jump on a special session of a Zoom meeting, and we try to keep it to an hour. and we go through the next set of things that we need to work on. And as long as people can do that from home or even sitting on a beach somewhere, if they're going away, they have committed to doing it, because the alternative is not something we want to deal with. So, but I think charter school life, it's never 8 to 4, ever. It's usually 80-hour weeks and beyond, but clearly this is about our survival.
Yeah.
Agreed. And Ryan, any additional thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, other than the fact that I just agree with everything Marlena spoke about. Yeah, every charter leader I talk to, they're all wearing 10 hats, literally, doing several different jobs that they probably shouldn't be. That's across the board for all employees in a charter school. It's just the life. And so I think it's, remember, in order to have the energy to, do an effective job, there's got to be an element of self-care included in here. So every once in a while, make sure you put on your own oxygen mask first. And, from that standpoint, just be very, I think as you look forward, the more conservative you can be in nature as far as, projections and estimates. I think oftentimes we oftentimes get excited about the opportunity at hand, and maybe, over projecting the number of students that might show up, can put you in a bad situation later down the road if those numbers don't actually come to fruition. And so just being conservative in nature as you budget, going through some self-care. And I think now is the time that all this effort, all this work you've put in over the years of making the schools, there's a reason you're doing it. There's kids at the end of the day that are impacted by this work, and it's great work you're doing. And so don't lose the steam, double down on it, and jump back in with full vigor if you can, if you have the energy for it. So,
Michael, one strategy that we hadn't thought about, that we actually are going through a process right now, only about 65% of the ESSER funds have been spent across the country. And clearly, whether it's because of supply chain or whatever, the ability to spend that money is shrinking. So what we did is we talked to our state, and any of your vendor contracts that might be on a year contract with you, if you can get them in a multi-year contract, even though it extend out to 2028 or whatever, you can encumber that money now. So that was one strategy that we looked at, is where we could get multi-year contracts with our contractors and vendors. And that was very, very helpful for us, because we were able to hold on to our professional development support, whatever, as long as we made it a multi-year contract.
Yeah, super creative tactical insight there, as we think about getting creative with our budget, is, how can we leverage the last of these ESSER funds to our benefit? And certainly a great recommendation there. We've hit the 17-minute mark. This has been an incredible conversation. Both of you have so much insight. I just want to say first and foremost to both of you, thanks for taking the time to join us this week. This isn't the end of the conversation on budgets. I'm sure we'll have more conversations in the future. I do want to make I'll first say thanks for the mention of our team, Dr. Palmieri, on our enrollment initiatives. If you have more information on that, you can hop onto our website. But I will say, as school leaders confront their budget over the next few weeks and few months, we do have an incredible guide that is all on budgeting, breaking down budgeting month by month on what you should be focused on, as well as giving insights from a variety of experts like Dr. Palmieri and other school leaders on how you can handle budgeting and forecasting, and how you make sure that it's all tied towards your annual audit that your school has. So you can hop onto the website to find that as well at growschools.com. With that, I will say a final thank you to Ryan and Dr. Palmieri. Appreciate you both joining us today. We'll have to have you both back as we confront this fiscal cliff, if you will, over the next few months as school leaders head to next year. And say to everyone that's joining us, thanks for your time. We'll be back next week on another topic. And look for an upcoming webinar on this topic. We're going to be tackling budgeting and the conversation around ESSERS in more depth, likely in the next couple of weeks. We're still confirming a few guests there, but hope to bring you that before mid-May, I think. So with that, I'll say thank you to you all for joining us. And thanks again for everyone. Hope you have a great day. We'll see you next Tuesday. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Michael. Take care.